Hello friends, today we're going to be doing a fun little deep dive on Ableton's Roar, which is a very powerful new device inside Live 12 that you can use if you'd like to absolutely destroy your sounds. You could add just a little bit of saturation and color. You can quickly add movement, create variations. And I have to say, I think that the masterminds at Ableton did a really good job laying this out because it really connects with my process for how I get into flow state, create variations. So we'll go through some practical examples, some basses, some drums, some FX, some leads. Hopefully we'll spark some ideas for you guys. However, before we dive in, very important announcement. We've opened up the EDMProd mastermind community. If you're looking to connect with other producers, get some feedback on your music, why not do that, right? I can say for a fact that if I never got feedback on my music, I would be depressed right now. If I did not connect with other producers, I would be even more depressed right now. So hop in there. There's a bunch of free downloads, and it'll be a great way for us to all level up together. All right, let's do it. So here we are inside Live 12 with a clean instance of Roar loaded up. And we'll go through the knobs as we go through specific examples. But for now, let's just focus in the top left corner here, where we essentially have our input gain and a couple other controls. So let's say we're working with the drum loop and we're doing some additional sound design. As we boost our input gain, it's going to start to distort more. And there's also this interesting tone knob here, which is basically going to allow us to laser in more so on the lows or the highs of our sound and create sort of a shelving effect. They've also included this nifty color compensation knob, which is essentially going to bring back some of the lows that we just took away, or vice versa. And so maybe we would just, for now, call these our drop one drums. And then as you're doing sound design, it's good to just start making variations. So I had an idea for break drums when I had this tone knob placed up here. If we perhaps threw some reverb on here, maybe this could be a variation of our drums that kind of sits further in the background during a break. And so this is a really good way to do your sound design. Just let the ideas start waterfalling. Maybe you have an additional idea as you're messing around with these knobs for a heavier type of drums that you could use, and just let it keep flowing. So now let's dive into more of the meat and potatoes of the effect and make a sustained bass. So I just have a G note playing here from operator, and Roar right now isn't doing anything. However, I'm going to bring this up, which is the amount of shaping occurring. And there's a bunch of interesting shaping modes. There's also a bunch of different routing modes. So right now we just have one stage of shaping. We could have one stage followed by another. We could have parallel, which would be output separately. And then you can choose your blend here. Maybe I want 72% of stage 1 and 28% of stage 2. Multi-band, which is essentially setting your cutoffs down here and then processing the low, mids, and highs separately. Mid-side, if you wanted to process the mids and the sides of your sound separately. And feedback, which is basically processing your input signal and then the signal that's feeding back into the input signal separately. So a lot of options, and we'll just start with simple single stage and try to create a sustained bass. I usually like to thicken my sounds first and then worry about timbre later. So give it some drive. We'll play with the filtering, add a resampling filter. So I'm already liking how that's sounding, so maybe I would call this sustained bass 1. I would duplicate it, then perhaps make another variation down here, twisting more knobs. One other thing to mention in sort of, if I go back to sustained bass 1, in this area of the effect, is there's this bias knob. So right now we're clipping symmetrically, meaning the push and pull are being clipped evenly. But if we move this dotted white line will start to... It essentially creates a DC offset, so then you can clip the push or pull more or less. And so now we have basically some ideas for sustained basses. Let's say we want to go on and make some wubs. So for this, let's start to move on to a different section of the effect and look at the modulation matrix, which is over here. This is kind of the mini view. You have to expand it here. And then if you want to expand it even more, you just press this. So I have quarter note wubs right now. And roar is not doing anything, but let's, again, start to shape it, and let's find a mode that catches our ear. So now we can start to sort of visualize how this is going to wub. I'm going to take, and just backing up, this seems very intimidating, this sort of like mission control view, but it's really pretty simple. It's just two LFOs up here, an envelope follower, and a noise modulator. So let's say we wanted to, and as I click a knob here, it's going to highlight over here. So shaper 1 amount is now highlighting over on the right. So I'm going to move the amount with LFO 1, and let's use a little wobble shape. Let's go quarter note rate. Now it's starting to wub a little bit. And let's use a second LFO to make the amount sort of go up and down. Like that. So let's introduce LFO 2, go down to the LFO 2 section, and we're going to choose, well, it's already on the setting that I want here, up and down. So now we'll hear it kind of go. So you can start to hear the possibilities already. And then we would maybe, I don't know, introduce a little bit of randomness using our noise modulator. Noise modulators can be good for bringing in just a little bit of chaos. So let's maybe map that to the bias knob. See if it sounds good or bad. Actually sounds pretty good. So maybe I would bounce that out. And as far as the noise modulator goes, I had found that Simplex and Wander are a little smoother sounding. Sample and Hold is a little choppier, and Brown is very chaotic. One other thing to mention here is that you can drag these shapes of the LFOs. That relates to the morph knob as you move it. And there's also a global amount, which is interesting. It's basically the total amount of the LFO and modulation effect. So it's 0, it would be doing nothing. And then you could crank it up. You can even go up to 200. So now we have some wubs. Let's move on to a different section of the effect and create some more lead type sounds. Some kind of metallic-y robot rhythm, something a little more in your face. To do that, let's go, again, quarter note wubs with a little space in between. And in this feedback section here, you're going to start to introduce some delays. And as you crank this up, you're going to be basically boosting the amount of signal that's feeding back into your original signal. And you'll see that these modes here, time, synced, triplet, and dotted, are similar to what you have in the Ableton delay, essentially just different timings. Right now we have 7.36 milliseconds. If we wanted to sync it, we could. And then there's also a note mode, which is basically going to have your delay time be set in semitones. Let's just stick with time for now. And then let's just keep moving knobs. frequency and width control down here, which is basically a band pass you can use to tighten your sound a little bit. And by default, this feedback gate is on, which is basically that the feedback no longer plays once the input is silenced. And then feedback inversion. So there you go. You can make a crazy lead if you want to using the feedback section. And lastly, there's this output section here, which is essentially a compressor that they have on by default. It seems like the folks at Ableton spent some time dialing it in because it sounds pretty good as is. But of course, A/B it, compare it at 0% with your own compressors. This sidechain high-pass filter option is also enabled by default, which is basically making it so that the lows of your signal are not impacting the compressor as much as if this were off. And then you have output and dry wet. So never forget, sometimes you can just sprinkle on an effect. It's very easy into tricking yourself thinking that the craziest thing ever is better, but in the context of your track, maybe that will be more effective. So now we have some basses, some drum loops, some wubs, some robot leads. Let's go on to some effects. And now for this one, I've loaded up just the sound of a lion roaring from YouTube, as the effect is called roar. And so maybe we're making a track about lions and we want to start our track with our main character, a lion roar. So let's see if we can just drive this thing. Let's check out some of the different modes. Maybe we're making some sort of initial impact or like a drone or effect that could play with lots of reverb at the start for the first 8 bars of our track or so. So we'll add some reverb and let's go multi-band and just start cranking knobs. Wow, that sounded like an eagle or a bird or something layered on top. There's your war horn. So you could go crazy making effects that then maybe these would be further in the background. They'd be playing as sort of ambience, you know. Maybe you could filter them down a little bit and just have them playing as sort of an initial impact that's kind of far in the background as some ambience when your drop hits. Endless possibilities. But yes, you can definitely push stuff a lot. I didn't even boost the drive for this one. Christ, that's kind of a scary animal sound. But let's keep going on and look at a little bit of a different example. I've got some chords here. And now let's take a look at the envelope follower. So if you see here in the gray, this is essentially the sound of my chords. And then there's this blue line, which is basically following the shape of my input signal. And then we can map that blue line to certain parameters. So let's add some color and map our envelope follower to the amount of shaping. So now you can hear that when that transient hits of the chord, it's boosting the amount of shaping. You can also see it. It's starting to distort. And so again, if you're doing a sound design session, this effect is set up well for you to just keep making variations. So maybe those would be my drop 1 chords. You could add a filter. I really like the resampling filter because it gives you sort of that bit crushed effect to add some highs. Maybe those would be my drop 2 chords. Sounds like more of a lead. Then maybe I'd make another variation, which is like, maybe I'd go back to low pass and it'd be something further in the background. Let's try a different type of shaping here. All right. So lastly, I just wanted to sort of go through some of the presets because they're pretty cool. And I was just messing around with this acid line and kick, and I popped on this first preset called Acid Distortion. So if you press that knob there, you can start to hot swap through all the Roar presets. And yeah, let's just start listening to some of these. That's pretty cool. Alrighty, y'all. So that is Roar in a nutshell. I hope you guys have a couple ideas brewing around in the back of your head that you can use for your next track. I know for myself, I'm going to be using this as a creative sound design tool. Force yourself to just use Roar. Make a few basses that are connected to each other. Make some drum sounds that are connected to each other. And then the next day, make a loop out of those drums. Make a loop out of those basses. The next day, make your track. It's good, it's good. It's bad, it's bad. Who cares? Just move on. And of course, guys, please do join that EDMProd mastermind community. Obviously there's nothing better than just connecting with other people who are doing the same thing as you, but also getting feedback on your music is by far the easiest way to quickly level up, get a fresh perspective. And there's a bunch of free downloads in there. And so let's all just team up, level up, and take it to the stars, baby. Peace.